There was one already in Hardhorn that was quite nice. We're hoping this wind gets up a little bit more stiff so that...
All right, well, we got her done. Ryan got it done, I should say.
Hey, you guys, I just arrowed War Pig. Yes! Hey guys, Muck here. A couple weeks ago, I was shooting the 3D provincials here in Saskatchewan, and I was shooting with arguably one of the best 3D shooters in Canada, if not the world, really. And we were just chit-chatting and talking, you know, general archery and stuff like that. And one thing that he was kind of emphasizing for shooting unknown is, oh, and first, Cody, you're going to laugh because you were joking that, oh, Muck's going to make a video on this. And I said, you know what, I'm going to. So I'm going to give you credit for this one. One thing that's super important in unknown is knowing how much your arrow drops and how much your arrow rises when you misjudge. So this is unknown distance. So assuming you got a perfectly sighted in bow where at 20 to 50 you can hit the bullseye, whatever distance you're at, assuming your bow is perfectly sighted in, knowing for unknown distance, knowing you know, if you misjudge by 3 yards, how much your arrow will drop, or vice versa, if you overjudged, your arrow will rise, is really important to the unknown game, because it'll help you fine-tune your judging yardage, but more importantly, it will, if you know how much your arrow drops per se at 50 yards, if you misjudge by 5 yards, how far will that arrow, you know, impact low, or vice versa, if you're 5 yards high, how much will impact will affect your 3D scores. And it'll make you a better archer all around if you can, obviously, the closer to the distance, you can be bang on. And guys like Cody are really good at your judging distance. Rarely do he miss by 1 or 2 yards, almost never. For me, I'm really good at unknown distance, except for you know, if there's a 20 target course, I will make 2 or 3 targets where I'll grossly miss like 5 yards. And I know that that's not really acceptable, but that might be the difference between, say, top 3, top 10 in your division. So you really have to fine tune that. So I'm going to just make a quick video here. I've got a tape measure, and I'm going to be using my 3D setup, which is, oh yeah, so obviously speed matters when it comes to how much it drops or rises. So I'm using a 70-pound bow, 353 grain arrow, I think. I think that's that, and it's running about 285 feet per second. If I was using my target setup, it's 60 pounds with lighter arrows, but it's not as much speed, so they're obviously going to be greater drop. So speed matters. So the industry standard, at least here in Canada, is 5 grains per inch per arrow. So if I have a 70-pound bow, you take your overall weight of your arrow, divide that by 70 pounds, and that'll tell you where you're at. And the industry standard here in Canada, or what they can deem safe, is 5 grains per inch. So in Canada, for most of our sanctioned shoots, you want to be as close but not under 5 grains per inch. If you're shooting in the known division, it's not nearly as important, because your tape is set for your arrows and you know the distance. So a lot of that will be shooter error in you and not so much in your equipment. But in unknown distance, it's very common to be plus or minus 1 or 2 yards per target when you're judging. So that's what I'm doing today. So speed matters. So the closest you can get to that 5 grains per inch, or in say an ASA for men division, it's 290 feet per second. The closer you can get to that, obviously the more accurate you're going to be, or less drop or rise you're going to have. But for me today, for this test, a 70-pound bow, 350 some grain arrow, it's flying at about 285 feet per second, and I think it's like 5.4 grains per inch or something like that. So I'm really close to what I can sort of benefit out of my draw length. I have a short draw length. So I'm going to put a vertical line, a horizontal line, and I'm going to shoot at 50 yards, and I'm going to video it for you. And then I'm going to take my tape measure, and I'm going to see and I'm basically going to just do 5 yards, a 5-yard miss, rather than go through, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, which you certainly can do in your own time. But for this test, I'm going to go at 50 yards. I'm going to set my tape for 50 yards, and I'm going to try to make or execute as best I can shots on that line. And then I'm going to take my tape measure and I'm going to measure how much it dropped. And then I'm going to do the opposite. I'm going to add 5 yards and see what the rise is. And that should give me a pretty good idea of if I made a bad shot in an unknown round, then that'll kind of give me an idea of my miss. Now, obviously, the closer you get, so 20 yards, you can be out a couple of yards and still hit the center because there's, you're closer and there's less room for error, or your arrow doesn't drop. But as you get out to 50, 1 yard makes a huge difference. So I'm going to do 5 yards, 50 yards, and see my drop. Okay, so that was a 50-yard shot with 45 marked on my tape. So I shot it 5 yards low, so I underjudged it by 5 yards, aiming at this horizontal line. Let's have a look at how much it dropped. The farthest was about 5 1/4 inches. The closest, 4 1/2. And kind of I guess this would be the farthest. 6 inches on this one, so that'd be the farthest. So, and the shortest, what did I say it was? 4 1/2. So somewhere in here is my midpoint. So that's a good indication of how much drop I get at 50 yards if I underjudged it by 5 yards. So let's add 5 yards now. Let's go to 55 and see what the rise does. Okay, so this was 55 yards, 5 yards high. So simulating, I overjudged by 5 yards. I want to see what the rise is of my arrows. The farthest arrow is about 4 1/2 inches. The closest is about 3 3¾ and middle of the way is about 4 inches. So as you can tell, my grouping's a lot better on the rise, then a little bit more consistent over that horizontal line. But this shows you that at 5 yards, I'm quite a bit less yardage out on the rise than I was the fall. So I don't know, I'm not a physics guy, but I'm assuming it has something to do with the gravitational pull of your arrow. Even though it's only 50 yards, it's probably being pulled down. As the arrow's rising, it rises less than it sinks down. And I'm guessing that's because as it falls down, it's got gravity pulling it down, so it's a little bit greater. So yeah, this is really important to do if you're an unknown shooter, to know what your rise and your fall will be on misjudges. You should do this at 40, 30, and 20. of course, as you get closer, these will get less and less. So, you know, go to 40 and see what your 5-yard miss is. Go to 30 and 20, and you'll see that this gap will probably get less. You still obviously will miss, but it will show you what the rise and your fall of your arrow. I hope this helps. Talk to you soon. Okay guys, that's a wrap for that quick video. I just want to recap that this test, obviously there'll be more gap with slower bows. Obviously your tape will have more gaps on it. You'll have a bigger tape, but the whole idea of this is get an idea of what your 5-yard miss will be at 50 yards, plus or minus 5 yards. Like I said, I'm shooting 70-pound bow with about 285 feet. I got a short draw length, so I'm not as fast as some. So obviously, faster bow, less drop, less rise. Slower bow, more drop, more rise or less rise. If you have less poundage, heavy of the arrow obviously is a huge thing. So, have any questions? Send me a message. Cody, this one's for you. I truly believe this is a hidden tip for unknown distance that everybody should know, because I mean, I've been shooting unknown my whole life pretty much, except this last little while when I was shooting known, and I never knew what my fall and rise of my arrow was. So now I do. So I'm going to my next practice session, I'm going to do it at every distance, and curious to see, you know, what my rise and fall is all the way out to 50 and all the way back to 20 yards. So hope you enjoy this video. Take care. We'll talk to you soon.